You are listening to CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Saturday afternoon. It's beautiful outside, and you could be outside enjoying the weather. I hope that you are, especially here in the greater New York City area. The leaves are turning. I don't know about you, but it was a little bit chilly this morning. I woke up to temperatures in the 40s, and now I think it's more toward the 50s, 60s, but the sun is shining. You really couldn't ask for a more beautiful day. The colors of the trees are starting to turn into those autumn colors that we all love. And so thank you for being here. We have a lot to talk about this Saturday. I missed you. I didn't get to see you last week as much as I wanted to, but you're here now, and thank you so much for tuning in. You're listening to CMajor Before the Show. So let's jump right in. This Saturday, I made some notes of some things that I wanted to talk about, and I've been talking about it all week. I feel like today is a very special day because I invited some people to listen in. If you're listening, let me wave to you. Let me applaud you for being here. Thank you so much. It's nice, when others are interested in what you have to say. And to be honest, it makes me a little bit nervous. Not because I'm not sure of what I have to say. I definitely have something to say about music making, but it's just so nice to know that someone really wants to hear this. They really do. Today's podcast episode will cover the following topics. We're talking about virtual keys. We're talking about chords. We're talking about a new solo piano song. I have some teacher-student shout-outs to give, next week's class topic to talk about, homework assignment for listening. I have a live poll question that's going on actually right now as we speak. And then I will talk with you about what we intend to talk about next week. But virtual keys, the reason why I want to talk about virtual keys because I knew the AES show was coming up this week. Now, I know you heard me mention it. And I was so excited about it. The audio engineering show happened this week in New York. I think it may be still going on just a little bit, or they're starting to wind down the show. But if you had a chance to go, it was just amazing this year. I knew in my heart of hearts that they were going to highlight podcasting, and sure enough, they did. So some of the highlights from the show, I saw on display a 1.3 pound keyboard, if you can imagine that. Let that sink in a little bit. 1.3 pounds. Imagine that. Somebody can go to a gig literally with their keyboard in their pocket, and you can use it with any DAW. Any digital audio workstation will work with this keyboard. So I took probably just a few seconds of video footage of somebody actually demoing the keyboard. It wasn't the person behind the booth. It was a customer that was really, really excited. And I had some questions, but I thought, you know what? Let me just take a picture. I'll read about it online, and then I guess I can always contact the manufacturer if I have further questions. But what I want to do next week is kind of jump in a little bit more about the topic of music production. So if you're interested in that, feel free to invite your friends along so that you can listen in and have that discussion over a cup of coffee and let me know what you think about the idea of playing a keyboard that light. Is it possible to bring everything you need to bring performance-wise to the gig with something that lightweight? But it was amazing to see it. And they had different sizes too, different keys, different numbers of keys, and it seemed that you could also execute the same dynamic range that you would on any other keyboard. Just amazing stuff. It had connections. Unbelievable to see. Anyway, the other thing that stood out to me was a podcasting approach. Now, we're all very blessed to be here on Spreaker. I cannot tell you how excited I am about the Spreaker app. I just think it's just amazing. Just all the things that they are enabling us to do as podcasters with the app. So I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you so much, Spreaker, for that. And I ran into a manufacturer, or at least the representative, that was talking with us about an interface designed for some of the top name mics in the industry. Now, if you just think about that for a second, I don't want to advertise for the manufacturers, but let me just give you some hints. This microphone has a price point of around $400. And it was the same microphone that Michael Jackson used when he was either recording or something else, but it's known for that. So you can maybe Google those facts and then see what comes up. $399.99. And I will say this, it is available at Sweetwater, this particular interface, but it's just amazing some of the direct things that you can do. Now, the reason for thinking about an interface, suppose I want my voice to sound a little bit different here on the podcast, or maybe stronger, then there's a way to do that through this interface. And so I hope to be in touch with Spreaker about that as well, just to make sure they're cool with that. You know, I don't want to start plugging things into the app that may or may not be acceptable, but the way it was explained to me, it should work. So that was basically what I had to say about virtual keys for now. We're going to loop back around to that topic and now move on to chords. The order of chords is going to be important for our future podcast episodes. Why? Because we've been talking about chords in ABC order. This was supposed to be a Chords for Students series, but not really a series. It was unofficially a series. And so we've talked across the summer. We've been talking consistently for, it looks like 175 episodes worth anyway. We've been talking about music making, and chords has been a big part of that, especially this summer. And what I want you to try to do is to start grouping some of these chords together on your own. I think we have about 2 chords left to talk about. We have to talk about F, and we have to talk about G. And I'm thinking either presenting them individually over on the CMajor radio show, or maybe together. We'll see how I feel next week. You're listening to CMajor before the show, so we talk about things that will be coming up on the CMajor radio show. That's the purpose of our podcast over here. But I want you to try today also to listen and try to play chords along with me in the new piano song that I'm about to introduce. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a music break. I'm going to take a sip of some water real quick, and I'm going to come right back, and I'm going to introduce the new piano song. You're going to hear it for the first time right here on CMajor before the show. Back in a moment. the show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. Thank you so much for tuning in. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome to the podcast. I'm really glad that you're here. We normally play background music that you'll hear throughout the podcast, and sometimes I'll turn that all the way down like now, and then I'll just turn it back up whenever I feel like I should turn the music back up. But you may be wondering why I call myself C major. Some people hear that, they go, oh, that's so cute. You call yourself C major. Some people don't get it. They don't get that I call myself C major. They think I just write songs in C major. But I write in other keys. And to be honest, I don't feel like a composer. I just feel like somebody that writes. And I write just according to how I feel. And in this case, I really wrote how I was feeling because it turned out that I had an opportunity this past week to do some spontaneous music making, believe it or not. And it was just such a surprise to really think of something to play in the moment and to learn quickly enough to present in a group. But I wrote a solo piano song, first time in a long time. I mean, my theme as an independent artist has been heartbreak and wonder, and not to be someone that talks about heartbreak all the time, but it just happened that some things happened in my life that I felt strongly about, and then some music came out of that, and then there was some wonder involved. But I would say this would be a song that's associated more with the wonder part of things. But at the same time, I feel like I gravitate towards a particular sound. So I was toggling in and out of minor and major, and then I thought of some things to write in the beginning, but it was all inspired by this person, this amazing person that I met who's also a teacher. So the new piano song is dedicated to my new teacher friend, and I hope she's listening today. If you are, let me give you a hand clap and a shout. Thank you so much for tuning in. And so I'm going to go into detail a little bit more over at the CMajor radio show, because I want to talk about some of the chords that I use. That's really what I want to do. So again, this show, CMajor Before the Show, is to talk about what's coming up on the CMajor radio show, where we try to do things a little bit more academically over there, but then we dabble with that over here. This is supposed to be more like a fun, lighthearted show, and sometimes I tend to go on and on and on about things. But the music, the way, I'll tell you about the structure. So the music, the way that I imagined it after having this conversation with this person, I wanted to show by playing a flurry of notes at the beginning of the song and at the end of the song to represent her traveling. She's traveled very far to be here. And so I just imagine what that would be like to travel from where she's from. And, I'm hesitating giving too much detail because, sometimes you just want to protect the person, and their identity and all of that on the internet today. But I'm inviting you, if you're listening right now, to be on the show so you can talk about some of the amazing things that you're doing in your own teaching practice. I would love that. And I know there's a chat feature on this app, but we haven't used it yet. So it may be possible even to set it up so that we can do some sort of chat as well. I won't mess with that today, but I'm hoping in the future that we can get together and maybe do something like that. I think that would be very exciting, and my listeners would appreciate that as well. So at the beginning, you're going to hear my idea of notes that represent movement. And then the other amazing thing that happened was that I thought about my students. So my students are sometimes my best teachers because they're the ones who know a lot about the music that they're interested in learning, and then they tell me, and then I'm supposed to teach them that. So that's just the way it worked out. We live in a different time, and my piano teacher would have not encouraged me to bring songs to her that I wanted to learn, but more accept what it is she had to offer as a teacher and to learn quote unquote properly, the proper way to play the piano. So we live in a different time. I think that now with technology in the 21st century and social media and all of these other pop culture influences, when you go to teach piano lessons to someone, don't be surprised if they say, teach me, and then they fill in the blank. I want to learn this. I don't want to learn that. So in this solo piano song, you're going to hear that I'm borrowing a portion of two separate melodies introduced to me by some of my students. And I will say this about my new friend. She teaches Indian classical music for singing. Has a beautiful voice. I mean, I have never seen anybody up close sing Indian classical music. But I've heard some of my students talk about it, so it's just so nice to hear that voice in person. And again, imagine this is in a group. We had a group of teachers that had gathered. So my dreams were coming true. You've heard me say it on the podcast. Oh, how I wish I could have a dialogue with other teachers. I want to know what they're going through. And, I tried to with some of the teachers in the area. But, sometimes it's not possible. People are so busy. They're not in that mind space of, let's sit down and have coffee and let's talk about the work that we do. But it was such a good exchange. And I felt that we had a good exchange in our conversation this past weekend. So that's where I was. I'm working on becoming a better teacher for my students. That's what I'm trying to do. It's a work in progress. And so this solo piano song that I was inspired to write is a work in progress. And I also aim to continue to try as an artist to combine technology with artistry. Amazingly, we talked about some of that too over the weekend. I couldn't believe it. I said, that's the very thing that I'm working on. And some people have certain feelings about it. They really do. I recently talked with a student who has a fear that technology may be something that can replace that student. I'm trying to refrain from saying the pronouns, but I'll just say the student had a fear of that. And then I met some artists over the past weekend that had that same fear. And I'll read a little bit more about my notes on that, but not too much, just a little bit, because I want to save some of that for next week, because I really want to go into a discussion about music production. I spent almost a decade of my life working in professional audio and explaining how things worked in the realm of technology. So I think I have something to say about that. But for the first time, I really pushed to think, how do I want to record my new piano songs going forward? In the past, I have worked with an engineer. Is it time for me to really, really jump feet first into the whole engineering pool, not just as a producer of my own songs, but is it time to jump into that? And how will I do that? And how will I explain that to my students? And how will I continue my work as a private piano teacher? And how is it all going to work together? I don't really have those answers yet. But anyway, so here I am. I'm sitting with my laptop. And I decided, you know what? I'm just going to use it for recording. I'm going to record simply into GarageBand. It's unedited. It's not even quantized yet. You're hearing it right here, fresh off the presses, so to speak. And the name of the solo piano song is Suchitra's Theme. Hope I'm saying her name right. Suchitra. There's an H in that name that's supposed to be pronounced even though you see a T and an R together. So it's Suchitra's Theme. And I recorded it in GarageBand, so I'm going to play it for you now. Let's see if I can pull this up. Get my computer going here. And so I humbly present this to you. Hopefully I don't sound like I have any other intentions going, but just to do a humble presentation. So here we are. You're going to hear it. I really grappled with whether or not I should play this live. I thought, you know what, should I play this on the piano or should I record it first? I thought, you know what, let me just record it first. So I recorded it as MIDI data first so that I could have it in GarageBand, and that way I can go back and manipulate the sound so I can put in other sounds with it. I can change the sound of it, So you're just going to hear it right now in its raw form. So here we go. This is the world premiere of my draft recording of Suchitra's theme as recorded by me and GarageBand. Okay, so let's press play, and I'm going to turn up the volume, and you're hearing it here first. You're listening to C Major before the show. And so that's it. That's Suchitra's theme as performed by C Major. Hope you enjoyed it. And what I'm going to do is talk about it a little bit more in detail today over at the C Major radio show. I think I was going to wait and talk about the rest of our chords, but I'm going to wait and do that next week. I think I want to talk about this theme and then maybe say something about how to study for next week's podcast over at the CMajor radio show. So if you happen to be around and you have the time, then tune in to our podcast over there, and we'd be happy to have you join us over there. It's for more academic discussions, but it was just amazing, really, to meet this person that inspired me to write something. And I hadn't written something in a while. I had a request before to write for some friends of mine. They had requested me to write something upbeat. So it's almost like pulling me out of my theme for Heartbreak and Wonder and say, okay, write something a little bit more cheery and upbeat. And so I did write something, but I just never quite felt right about it. Never felt that it was adequately represented on piano. So now I have some other ideas for that. But thank you, Suchitra. I mean, that was just such a nice surprise to be able to write something. And I want to say that she herself came up with a great song. She just out of the blue decided to sing something in class that she came up with, and it was just a very nice exchange. So thank you so much. I applaud you and your work as an artist, as a teacher. I look forward to learning many, many things about you and your travels and the things that you plan to do in your teaching practice. So I'm going to give you an applause. Thank you again. I really appreciate getting to know you. It means a lot. Thank you so much. And so along those same lines, I do have some other teacher shout-outs that I would like to give. And this is to all of my new teacher friends. I mean, I had a chance to have a dialogue with other teachers and other artists, including my past professors from Teachers College. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even believe that weekend. It was just so amazing. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful to connect and to reconnect, and I'm just looking forward to all of the possibilities, really. You know, it means a lot, you know. And the thing they don't tell you when you go out into the real world of teaching and then you step out of your family, so to speak, Teachers College is like my family. It really is. It's been my family away from home. And if I didn't have Teachers College as a family, I really don't know what I would do up here in New York, because you run into so many things that are challenging in the real world. So thank you all again so much. Now, I do want to give a shout out to this amazing teacher that I met last weekend as well. She's having fun making music, and you should have fun. You guys know how much I talk about this here on the podcast. You know, music making should be fun, but she's really doing that. She's having fun making music with friends. She does this whole collaborative songwriting web series. She's all over YouTube. She has an album out now. If you have a chance, check out the music of Amelia Robinson. She's doing interactive music for all ages, and it's called millstrills.com. So MILSTRILLS.com, millstrills.com. And it's very unique. I mean, there are all these accolades that have been written about it, and it's just really wonderful, the things that she's doing, you know. She has so much great energy, and it's just a really, really great person, and I look forward to hearing more about the things that you're doing. And for any of my teacher friends, my new teacher friends that I've met, if you have anything that you want me to shout out here on the podcast, I'd be happy to do it. I don't mind sharing that, and I just look forward to being able to boost what you're doing. There's no charge for it, and I'm just happy to do it. I'm just really glad that we're all coming together. That makes me really, really happy. I'm going to take a little bit of a breath. I feel like I introduced the song. I just gave some teacher shout outs. Let me take another sip of water, and I'll be right back. You are listening to C Major Before the Show. I take a little bit of a longer break. In the past podcast episodes, I think I've taken like at least a few more minutes of break time, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it short today. And so now we're going to move into some student shoutouts. Now, what you notice about today's photo for the podcast, I've featured hand models on the podcast in the past, and maybe even a little bit on the blog over at CMajorsClassroom.com. But our hand model of the week is a student that gave me their parents' permission to post the photo. So you will see that photo posted here. You'll see the photo posted over at the CMajor radio show. But it really is to show you how your hands should be on the piano if you're practicing technical exercises. So everybody has different hand shapes, different hand design, if you want to say it like that, the way their hands are made. And so I know in the past we've said some humorous things. Yes, I wanted to play the laugh track on that. And so it really was just to acknowledge, we live in a different time. I mean, we live in the times where everybody is trying to get their nails as beautiful as possible, in some cases as long as possible. It's all about the nail tips. So how do you sacrifice your glamour for piano lessons? I really think there should be a piano method out there that's written for anybody that wants to wear nail tips. I can't wait to see that. So seriously though, this student is really, really working hard at learning to play technical exercises in a way that's going to benefit them in the future. And believe it or not, I have students that are still learning left from right. So I just want you to know you're not the only one that is, thinking about tightening up your technical skills. But at the same time, I have very tiny beginning students that are still learning left from right. So on the photo, you'll see me post and label that it's the left hand and the other pictures for the right hand. So I had it for that reason. But also, let me know what you think about the form. And, I look forward to hearing some opinions on the photo post. So thank you again, and big shout out to that student. And a big shout out to all of my students. I mean, I have so many amazing students, and I'm really grateful, and have had, over the years as I'm building. But I think for the first time, I'm starting to feel serious about really building my teaching practice in a way that can be sustained. So I'm really happy for that. I don't feel like I'm competing with anyone. I feel like, especially when I was with that group of teachers last weekend, I felt like everybody was an individual, that everybody pretty much had a focus of what they wanted to bring to the field of music education. A lot of them were classroom teachers, which I've had classroom experience too, but I really still feel called to private piano teaching. Maybe it's because of the impact that my private teachers had on me. I feel like they laid the path for me to go the way that I went. And so I don't want to take that for granted. I think they left me with many gifts in terms of making me feel interested enough to want to teach others and to share music making with others. I do remember my first piano teacher from grade school. She gave me the opportunity to teach other students, and I think she was trying to groom me for that, but she did say, hey, try to teach some of your peers, try to teach some of the students who are just up and coming, and how would you do that? Start to think about how would you get them to play with the right amount of counts, and how would you count them in so they could start playing, things like that. So she was starting to give me little pointers on that. But again, it was a different time. We're talking about when she studied. It was long ago with some of the first professors that were learning about keyboard and piano pedagogy. And so, still to come up under her tutelage, so to speak, was just really a gift. So I'm really grateful for that. Now, next week's topic, let's talk about that. We said we were going to talk about F and G chords. Now, I want you to join me, if you can, for a discussion this afternoon at the CMajor radio show to discuss the chord changes in Suchitra's theme and to talk a little bit more about the way that it's shaping. Because I had a student that asked me if I had the theme written down on paper. No, I don't. It's all in my head. It feels like it's just something that was born out of spontaneous music making, something that could be developed further. And again, the melodies were borrowed because they're fractured melodies from tunes that my students introduced to me. They wanted to learn these particular songs, and so they had to play the songs for me from YouTube basically, and then say, hey, can you listen to this and then show me how to play it. And then if we could locate some scores for it, then we use those scores. But in most cases, when that happens, it's really just it's just a student showing me some audio representation of the song they want to learn, literally holding it up to my ear and say, hey, listen to this, now teach this to me on the piano. And so I had to learn these melodies, and the thing was that I retained them over a year or two, or whatever it's been since I first heard them, and then they just came out of my memory last weekend. So I'm thinking, though, as I go along, maybe I should develop like a more original theme, a more original melody rather, to go along with the theme, so that I have 3 melodies going. We'll see, and just take more of like a compositional approach to it. We'll see. So next week, F and G chords, and also next week we'll present more academic discussion on the current landscape of audio tools and music production methods among acoustic musicians as music producers. That's a long sentence. Let me just play a few seconds of music, and then I'm going to come back and say that again. Okay. All right. So what did I just say? Let me turn this music all the way down. Next week, we'll present more academic discussion on the current landscape of audio tools and music production methods among acoustic musicians as music producers. Now, that's a big sentence. Because how many acoustic musicians do you know who are also their own music producers? And how many acoustic musicians do you know still want to dabble in technology? Just think about that for a moment. And that has to do with a question that came to mind for today's podcast, which I'll say a little bit more about toward the end of today's episode. But it really made me think, because we talked a little bit about this in our dialogue last weekend when I was away from you. And the instructor asked us to think about how music has evolved for our particular instrument over the years. And I really had to think about that. So I'm going to play some examples of this. Now, you're going to hear some sounds that you've heard in past podcasts. So don't be too surprised when you hear that, because you've heard it. And it's because, I really am still very interested in this myself. But I'll go ahead and share with you my notes, because to be honest, I didn't get a chance to share everything I wanted to say in my group. And I don't think that we're going to talk further about this as a class. I think we may end up just writing about it, but I'm just going to share it with you tonight. So we had a couple of assignments going on, and sometimes how you try to keep your ego down and just listen to what others have to say. So I know this is still, I think in the past when I said, I was like, oh, maybe this is controversial, because some people think that you lose something when you're trying to record as a pianist. So the reflection on my art form is what I'm sharing right now. There were technological tools of the art form for me as a pianist. So it just made me think about Bach's time. He had the harpsichord, he had the organ, he had the clavichord, and then came the piano in the 18th century. And then since then, we have had electronic keyboards. We've had digital pianos and software tools. And so one of the first keyboards that I learned on for programming, and I've said this too in a past podcast episode, was the 01WFD. That's all I'm going to say. If you're listening and you know this model number, I don't need to say any more. But imagine that. One of my first professors for keyboard technology taught us to sequence on the 01WFD. So imagine all you've done your whole life was just study classical music, and you focused on acoustic piano playing. You kind of brushed away the idea of playing anything on a quote-unquote keyboard, because that's not a real playing experience for classically trained pianists. And for the longest time, I thought I would harm my technique by playing on a keyboard. To be honest, I really thought that. And so even when it came to playing organ, is not something I really wanted to focus on. I wasn't the best organ student, but I do not know how to use several manuals at once, and I do know how the pedals work and how to wear special shoes and all of that to play organ. But to me, to get that same feeling you get when you're sitting down to a Steinway is what initially was lacking for me when I was challenged with the idea of playing a digital keyboard, one that you could hook to a computer or sequence on right then and there and see how to build tracks on it. It was such a foreign idea to me. I just thought, why would I want to do that? But we had to do projects for the class and end up coming with something pretty creative, something that created a story out of the sounds that I chose for my sequencing. But I just remember my professor being so proficient at that, really. I mean, he just put us to shame at how fast he could do things. And speed is a big deal, because imagine you're tasked with putting together tracks for someone who's paying you to put together tracks. They're going to want you to work as fast as you possibly can, because they're paying you money. So if you're a slow worker, they're going to have to spend more money waiting on you to get your ducks in a row. So I just think about that. I was able to play one of the first keyboards that was built for sequencing, and then I was able to play, remember floppy disks? Remember that? I was able to play this keyboard that was built so that you could insert floppy disks and then change the programming of the keyboard by using the disk. So then the keyboard was just a shell, and then you inserted the disks, and then the disk pretty much loaded the keyboard with the sounds that you needed to play that keyboard. It was just amazing stuff that was going on. Remember Band in a Box? Remember Cakewalk? I've talked about Finale, notation software. Even today, I have conversations with some of my students about, the software, the notation software that's available to them. But I would say the most fun idea for using keyboards is usually, in my opinion, demonstrated by DJs. I've been long fascinated with DJs. If you know me, you know that I've been long fascinated with DJs, to the point of trying to figure out how they were mixing their sounds. So remember tapes, cassette tapes? For the longest time, I couldn't figure out how to do a fade on a song. And so I would try to bridge together two songs, cut one song off and then start the other song, was hoping that a fade would be there. It sounds funny. I have to play a laugh track for that, because now that I've had a chance to work in professional audio, I know what I needed was a mixer. And so, just to fade the sound into another song. But DJs can, they can just take one octave of what pianists use on a keyboard and then create dance music. I saw this for myself. And then, they study waveforms or, algorithms and other things that you can use and more advanced technology. But mostly they work with sound. They really have to have a gift for knowing how to put sounds together. And then the challenge, I guess, would be to transfer your artistry to virtual sound. Do you think that's possible? And the discussion I had this week was that this one particular student I spoke to thought that the artist would be replaced because of engineers and other people in audio engineering who knew how to program sound. So the example that this student gave was drum programming. But I just said to that student, I said, there's no way you can be replaced. You shouldn't be afraid of that. But then sometimes you have to agree to disagree with the person's point of view. But here's the thing that's so fascinating to me. Now with the possibility of audio engineering and technology, that it's possible to sound like you're playing a Steinway, but not really recording on one. So the discussion that I had previously with someone was that this may be the more cheaty way of recording. And that person was not sold on the idea of authentic recording. But then that same person brought up in that conversation how Horowitz would have some of his recordings fixed, whether he knew it or not. If there was a wrong note that was played in a live performance, there were engineers that had to go back and make sure that sound was corrected. How were they able to do that, And so again, this person was talking about how sometimes you can have the most magnificent recordings and then you go back and you look and you see on the computer everything was spliced together. Splice, I think was how they said it. But let me just say this. I feel challenged by technology, but I feel like it's a good thing. I think you can take a MIDI controller to manipulate the sound, and all of the developments for audio engineering that are the most recent developments can be found at some place like the AES show. So the AES show is happening this past week at the Javits Center in New York. So if you were lucky enough to get over there, and if you still have time, definitely see if you can jump in. It's a great time to meet up with old friends as well. And I would say that I was a little bit sad that this past weekend I missed something else that I wanted to attend, which has nothing to do with technology. It was the coffee festival. So I remember I told you I wanted to attend that, but I did meet a teacher who had someone in her close circle that was able to attend that festival. So we got to talk about it, which was still exciting. So I'm happy about that. But here's the big question. When it comes to technology and artistry, and it comes to virtual keys, when it comes to recording and programming and all of that, if Bach were alive today, what do you think he would do? As one of the chief organizers of sound, how do you think Bach would choose to use technology? Or would he just say, it's not worth my time? Would he say that? Of course, we'll never know that. But you have a lot of attitudes where artists and teachers are purists and they think about the integrity of using technology. So this sound, let me just turn this sound up a little bit, because how would you use a monotron? Would you even care to use a monotron, first of all? Or would you say, what, this is not for me? Okay, so you've heard me use the phone. Now, for me, I'm not as creative as a DJ, okay? So when I saw online, somebody just did something like that, and then they looped it and actually turned into a beat that they could use with other devices that were connected to this one, or to use the delay version of this monotron, of this analog rhythm synthesizer, to use the delay version of that to create effects in this, and then just run with it. I was thinking to myself, I would never have thought to do that, but I don't have the mind of a DJ. But don't be shy about jumping into technology. Maybe surprised what you can come up with, or you can stay a purist. You say, what, I'm not going to practice, I'm not going to program, I'm not going to record on anything but a Steinway. Surprisingly, I did meet someone like that at the audio engineering show that was a music industry professional when it came to recording, and that's how that person thought they should use their microphone, to not use MIDI data to record piano sounds, but to use their actual own Steinway that they owned. And then we talked about the tuning, we talked about all the other things that go into that, and you have to have the perfect room design for that. So a lot goes into it, but when I think about some of the leading people in the music industry and what they've done, it's really no big secret. I think it's something that you don't really talk about unless you are part of the Audio Engineering Society community. So then my other question would be to you, do you think as an acoustic musician that you have any business joining something like the Audio Engineering Society, or should you leave that to the sound professionals? What do you think about that? I talked with a teaching artist who wanted to be a DJ in her early years, and so shout out to you if you happen to be listening to the podcast. I'm very excited to share friendship with you. And I just invite anyone who's listening, any of my students, any of the teachers that I met, just to try to adopt this no fear attitude, And I don't think there's any way to mess up. I used to think there was a way to mess up your sound by using technology, but now that I'm starting to dabble more and more into it, I'm starting to feel like this is really, really fun. This could be really fun, used in a way that's beneficial to my teaching practice and to my students. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Really, I hope that you got something out of today's podcast. I'm going to be assigning some listening homework. And so the listening homework has nothing to do with creativity versus music achievement or anything like that. But join me over at CMajor's classroom for an assignment, actually on a percussion piece that was introduced to me by one of my top students. And there's even a way to view that piece on YouTube in a way that was recommended by this same student. So again, you learn so much from your students as much as you're trying to teach them. It's a nice exchange. We do have a live poll question, and it's based on a teacher discussion that I had this week. And the question is this: do you think integrity suffers when recording with virtual instruments versus live acoustic instruments? What are your thoughts about that? The poll is posted on Poll Everywhere, and I usually don't get any responses to that. I know there's a way to change that, but I'm not in a position to change that right now. But I'll probably end up just answering my own question just so I have a response. But feel free to respond to that. You know, it's posted on social media. It's there for you, again, to just maybe talk about over a cup of coffee. By the way, I had the most amazing cup of coffee this week. And so I'm very, very grateful for that cup of coffee. Do you think technology can replace human beings as an artist? That's the other sub-question to that question that we're presenting live right now as we speak. Thank you so much for tuning in live here on CMajor Before the Show. You've been listening to CMajor Porter. Again, you're invited to join me over at CMajor's classroom for the assignment this weekend. Join me over at the CMajor radio show a little bit later. We're going to continue our discussion about this new solo piano piece that I presented. Hopefully you can hear it, but I'm going to be playing samples of that over there as well. That show, by the way, has less attention going on with that than this show, and for good reason. You know, I really wanted to set it up that way because sometimes I feel like my speech gets a little bit more academic than what the average person would care for. And again, I wanted a different vibe over there. Although we are trying to make it a little bit more fun over there as well, but we're using more technical language. At first, we had set up the CMajor radio show to talk about the writing down of music. And certainly that can get a little dry if you're talking about how to write chords on a staff and all of that. So now we're moving in a different direction. It's more about listening and seeing you can write music outside of a staff. We've got some jazz discussion going on over there, the use of chords and jazz harmony, and trying to make things a little bit more fun for you to tune in to both of our podcasts. Thank you so much. I will see you all next week for more coffee and conversation here on CMajor Before the Show. Have a wonderful Saturday afternoon. If you want to give me a shout out during the week, feel free to do that. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.